I'm Dilek Tuna and you're watching A News. Let's take a look at today's top stories. US President Donald Trump delivered the State of the Union, highlighting immigration, economy and foreign policy. The UK government has agreed to release files related to the appointment of former Prince Andrew as trade envoy in 2001. And a Turkish Air Force F-16 fighter jet crashed near a highway in western Turkey, killing its pilot. President Donald Trump delivered the State of the Union address outlining his administration's economic priorities, immigration, enforcement plans and a tough stance on Iran, while drawing strong reactions from both Republicans and Democrats inside the chamber. Here's more from Obey Shahbandar.
At just under 2 hours long, it was the longest State of the Union speech by any American president in history. With a number of standing ovations from the Republicans, President Trump even had a bit of back and forth with some Democratic Party representatives who were heckling him. President Trump told them that they should be ashamed of themselves. Our nation is back stronger and better than ever, the president said, touting his economic accomplishments and lower prices for housing, mortgages, as well as lower prices in the supermarket and for groceries. Regarding Iran, President Trump said that Tehran has killed at least 32,000 protesters, shooting them and executing protesters by hanging. The president acknowledged that negotiations are continuing with Iran during his speech, and he said that he believed that the Iranian government wanted to make a deal, but however, President Trump said that he has not yet heard those words from Iran's leaders that they will never have a nuclear weapon. The president added that he would not allow the world's leading state sponsor of terror to obtain nuclear weapons. Too much applause during his State of the Union speech. President Trump said that he believed that Iran, according to his intelligence that he's received, is working to build ballistic missiles that could soon reach the United States. The president also awarded 3 Congressional Medal of Honors as the Commander-in-Chief. The Medal of Honor is the highest military decoration that can be awarded to a soldier. One of those medals was awarded to Eric Salver, who piloted a Chinook transport helicopter that took heavy damage during the operation to capture Venezuelan leader Nicolas Maduro. He sustained serious injuries but survived during the military operation, and he managed to successfully pilot the transport helicopter through heavy enemy fire. Another key signature of President Trump's speech was his dedication to enforcing immigration law and ensuring that criminal illegal aliens are deported back to their home countries. Among the families that the president recognized during his State of the Union speech was the mother of Irina Zarutska, the young Ukrainian refugee who was murdered in Charlotte, North Carolina last year as she was returning home from work. President Trump used the moment to comfort Irina's family and to honor her life, while lambasting Democrats for supporting policies that President Trump said allowed the quick release of repeat felons. The president vowed that he would ensure justice for Irina and that the criminal repeat offenders remain behind bars so they may not be allowed the opportunity to kill again. Trump's speech was a big hit with Republican members of the House of Representatives and the Senate. He even autographed the tie of a representative as the president left the House chambers at the end of his speech. Obey Shahbandar, A News, Washington.
Senior Iranian officials have signaled readiness to reach a nuclear agreement with the United States, describing the upcoming Geneva talks as a historic opportunity for a fair and equitable deal. Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi said diplomacy could deliver results quickly if political will exists on both sides. Tehran insists the negotiations focus solely on its nuclear program and the lifting of US sanctions. At the same time, Iranian officials warned that any military strike would trigger a regional response. The statements come as Washington reinforces its presence in the Middle East, deploying advanced fighter jets and carrier strike groups. US President Donald Trump addressed tariffs in his State of the Union, defending their economic impact while responding to a recent Supreme Court setback. A new 10% levy is now in effect, with the White House signalling a possible rise.
A new US 10% import charge took effect at midnight, replacing broader duties struck down by the Supreme Court last week. President Donald Trump has indicated he wants the rate raised to 15%, but no formal order has been issued, and Customs and Border Protection is enforcing the 10% rate for now. The earlier duties, ranging from 10 to 50%, had generated more than $175 billion in federal revenue, according to the Penn-Wharton budget model. Plaintiffs who challenged the previous measures have filed motions in lower courts seeking refunds. In his State of the Union, President Trump claimed his trade policies had driven economic gains, while criticising last week's Supreme Court ruling that blocked his previous global import measures.
I used these tariffs, took in hundreds of billions of dollars to make great deals for our country, both economically and on a national security basis. Everything was working well. Countries that were ripping us off for decades are now paying us hundreds of billions of dollars. And then just 4 days ago, an unfortunate ruling from the United States Supreme Court. It just came down. It came down. Very unfortunate ruling. But the good news is that almost all countries and corporations want to keep the deal that they already made. Right, Scott?
Meanwhile, markets were cautious on Tuesday. Global stocks opened lower amid uncertainty over trade policy, though major US indexes later closed higher, with technology stocks leading gains.
Germany's Chancellor is in Beijing for talks aimed at strengthening trade ties while addressing growing economic imbalances. The visit comes as Europe reassesses its relationship with both China and the United States.
German Chancellor Friedrich Merz met Chinese Premier Li Qiang in Beijing on Wednesday as part of a two-day visit focused on resetting economic ties. Before departing for China on Tuesday night, Merz stressed that cooperation must be based on fair and transparent competition, adding that both sides should rely on jointly agreed rules.
We also want to discuss how we can remedy the situation. For example, where overcapacity has arisen, or where there are export restrictions, where there are restrictions on access to competition that distort and prevent competition. We want to exploit the potential of our partnership, not diminish it.
China was Germany's largest trading partner last year, but Berlin has raised concerns about a widening trade imbalance and mounting pressure on its manufacturing sector. Li called on both countries to safeguard multilateralism and free trade, remarks seen as a reference to ongoing US tariff policies that have disrupted global markets.
China and Germany are comprehensive strategic partners who have accumulated successful practices of benign competition and integrated development. China-Germany cooperation is mutually beneficial and has brought tangible benefits to the people of both countries.
Merz is accompanied by senior executives from major German companies, including Volkswagen and BMW.
The UK government has agreed to release files related to the appointment of former Prince Andrew as trade envoy in 2001. The move comes as lawmakers scrutinise his past links with US sex offender Jeffrey Epstein.
Today we must begin to clean away that stain with the disinfectant of transparency.
Ed Davey, leader of the Liberal Democrats, used an Opposition Day debate in the House of Commons on Tuesday to force the release of files on the former Prince Andrew's appointment as UK trade envoy in 2001.
Whether it is the President of the United States and his Commerce Secretary, or Peter Mandelson and Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, or Epstein himself, their victims and survivors have seen those responsible evade accountability and escape justice for far too long.
His comments come after the arrest of Andrew Mountbatten Windsor for suspicion of misconduct in public office last week. Andrew strenuously denies any wrongdoing. The UK government agreed these documents will be released after officials review them to ensure they don't jeopardise the police investigation.
We support this motion today. Frankly, it is the least we owe the victims of the horrific abuse that was perpetrated by Jeffrey Epstein and others. The abuse that was enabled, aided and abetted by a very extensive group of arrogant, entitled and often very wealthy individuals in this country and elsewhere.
Earlier this month, the House of Commons agreed to release documents on Lord Peter Mandelson's appointment as US ambassador after his links with Epstein were uncovered.
Russia's Foreign Intelligence Service has accused Britain and France of working with Kyiv to help it obtain nuclear weapons to strengthen its position in peace negotiations. The agency provided no evidence, and the claims were swiftly denied by Ukraine and France, with Paris calling them an outright lie. Britain has not immediately commented. Separately, Russia's foreign ministry warned of the risk of a direct military confrontation between nuclear powers and the potentially grave consequences. The accusations come as Moscow demands Kyiv surrender the remaining parts of Donetsk, a condition Ukraine has repeatedly rejected. The United States has imposed cyber-related sanctions on 4 individuals and 3 organisations. The entities are linked to Russia and the United Arab Emirates, the Treasury Department confirmed on Tuesday. In a statement, it said the people were targeted for their acquisition and distribution of cyber tools harmful to US national security. At least 12 people died in floods and landslides in Minas Gerais in Brazil, with rescue teams battling through thick mud. Dozens remain missing as communities struggle to recover.
Thick red mud and debris is hampering rescue attempts after torrential rain swept through southeastern Brazil, killing at least 25 people on Monday, triggering flooding and landslides across the state of Minas Gerais. 18 of the deaths were recorded in the city of Juiz de Fora, while a further 7 were confirmed in the nearby town of Ubar, around 110 kilometers away. Authorities say 43 people are still missing. Fire officials say the scale of the damage is hampering access to the worst affected areas.
The biggest challenge is the area, which is very large. It includes 12 residences and a large number of residents who were inside their homes because it was raining at night. So we've been gathering these people to provide the best possible assistance, but the amount of mud is enormous. Therefore, we've been working meticulously to best assist the families and victims, but it's a time-consuming and meticulous job.
I saved a very young child, about 4 years old, and an adult along with the firefighters, a mother and a father. At that moment, you don't choose who you help. You do your best to help.
Brazil's federal government has declared a state of calamity in Juiz de Fora, where officials say around 440 residents have been displaced. Flooding and landslips have also forced municipal schools to suspend classes. The country is in the height of its summer rainy season, from December to March, when intense storms often trigger landslides.
The Louvre Museum's director has resigned months after the €88 million theft of the French crown jewels. Laurence Descartes has faced increasing scrutiny over security failures, labour unrest and an alleged ticket fraud scheme at the world's most visited museum in Paris. French President Emmanuel Macron praised her decision to resign, calling it an act of responsibility. Jewellery stolen during the daytime heist in October last year included a diamond and emerald necklace given by Emperor Napoleon to his wife. And over to some news in sports now. Karabağ's remarkable UEFA Champions League journey has come to an end at St James Park after a 3-2 defeat to Newcastle United. While overturning a heavy first leg deficit was always going to be a tall order, the Azerbaijani champions delivered a competitive performance, capping off a historic European campaign that has already broken new ground for Azerbaijani football.
End of the road for Karabakh. Their UEFA Champions League journey ends here at St James's Park in Newcastle with a 3-2 defeat. And what a journey it has been. It was always going to be a tall order for Karabakh to overturn that 6-1 lead that Newcastle had on them. But it has to be said, Karabakh played a more defensive, stronger, competitive game of football this evening, and they really showed that they can hold their own against these European giants, these Premier League clubs. And this isn't the night to dwell on defeat. This is the night to look at the history that has been made across this season. We're a far cry away from that initial surprise win against Benfica, which was the first ever win from an Azerbaijani side in this tournament. And remember Belal Mustafazadeh's crucial goal against Frankfurt, which determined Karabakh's place in the knockout stage. Well, that was the first ever goal by an Azerbaijani in this tournament. So there's so much legacy that has been created this season, and so much impact from these few months. Now, I have been speaking to some Karabakh fans about how they're feeling, and I'm sure Karabakh will be coming back to Baku with their heads held high. Are you happy?
Now we'll take a short break, and when we return, we'll explore what Prime Minister Modi's visit means for Israel's strategic partnerships and regional dynamics. Stay with us. Welcome back to A News. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi has arrived in Israel for a high-profile visit that includes an address to the Knesset and talks with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. The trip comes at a sensitive moment in the Middle East as regional tensions remain high and global alignments shift. We'll examine what this visit signals about the strategic depth of India-Israel ties and its broader geopolitical implications. Let's bring in our guest, Tom Gross, political analyst, joining us from Tel Aviv, Israel. Tom, welcome to the program.
Hello, good afternoon.
Good afternoon to you. Tom, let's begin with symbolism. How important is an address to the Knesset by India's Prime Minister at this time?
I'd say it's very important for several reasons. First of all, it's underlining the fact that both Israel and India are democracies in a world where there aren't that many democracies outside of, the G7 or Europe or so on. Both countries are doing relatively well, relatively successful. I might also add they both have a approximate 20% Muslim minority in both Israel and India, who are relatively well integrated into the societies. Of course, they have lots of strategic shared values and aims as well. But I'd say it is very important it's more than just symbolic. It's a very important visit. I might also add, as you know, this is a time of great tension revolving around the United States and Iran. And, there have been rumors that war could break out any time and Iran may hit Israel, even if Israel is not initially involved. If the United States hits Iran, Iran may respond with ballistic missiles to Israel, as it did last June. So in a way, it's quite brave of Prime Minister Modi to come on a 2-day state visit at this very moment when, tensions are high throughout the Middle East.
Okay, so aside from the common things that the countries have, or the things they have in common, India and Israel have steadily deepened defence and technology ties over the past decade. Is this visit consolidating an already mature partnership, or are we signalling a new phase?
I think it's doing both. It's consolidating the partnership and signaling a new phase. Look, just to take us back a moment, during the Cold War, before the collapse of the Soviet Union and communism, Israel and India barely had ties at all. They were sort of, India had recognized Israel, but they were not close ties. India was very much part of the Soviet bloc and Third World bloc and so on. So it's really in recent years, after both Israel and India economies have powered ahead and emerged, particularly in new industries, high tech, artificial intelligence, and as you just mentioned, also defense. So Modi has been to Israel on one official visit before, which was 9 years ago in 2017, where he and Prime Minister Netanyahu of Israel famously walked barefoot on the beach just south of the northern city of Haifa on the Mediterranean beach. And both Israel and India have matured in their relationship, but so have Modi and Netanyahu. Netanyahu was out of office for a while and has come back, and Modi is still in office. So these are two of the longest standing democratic leaders in the world, and they are quite close. They speak often. They're even, they describe themselves as friends. About the signaling a new phase, there are negotiations for a free trade agreement between Israel and India, and that looks like it may be signed, possibly even on this visit. And then, of course, we have all kinds of defense matters because, as you know, Israel's been involved in a war with Hamas, Hezbollah in Lebanon, Iran, the Houthis in Yemen, and so on. And Israel has deployed incredible missile defense capabilities to stop incoming rocket fire of thousands and thousands, tens of thousands of rockets shot down over the last 2.5 years. And it looks like every country in the world needs to take similar precautions. And Israel is now a world leader in cyber and also rocket defense, and India no doubt would like to collaborate more and have that technology and buy more missile defense technology.
And do you think, Tom, Defence Corporation is taking the lead here? How central is it to the relationship in terms of drones, missile systems, cyber capabilities compared with trade and innovation?
Well, there is, also trade and innovation. For example, although Israel is a tiny country compared to India, which I believe has now overtaken China as the world's most populous country, or if it hasn't done so, it's about to do so. And Israel, although the population is growing, is still under 10 million as opposed to 1 billion plus in India. So if my maths is right, that's more than 100 times the population India has to Israel. Nevertheless, there's fantastic technological advances in Israel in other matters beyond just the ones you mentioned of missile systems and cyber and drones. For example, in agricultural technology, Israel has found all kinds of irrigation systems to improve farming techniques, water sanitation, and so on. And indeed, on the October 7, 2023 attacks on southern Israel by the Palestinian group Hamas, there was at least one Indian injured that day. There were some killed later because there were Indian agricultural students studying in Israel, in southern Israel, on those very kibbutz that were attacked, learning advanced agricultural techniques to bring back home to India to improve agricultural production there too. So yes, there is definitely an emphasis on defense-related stuff, drones and missiles and cyber, but there are also, agriculture and medical and other areas of collaboration.
Okay, and Tom, given the ongoing Gaza situation, how does Modi's visit interact with regional sensitivities? Is India treading carefully diplomatically here, would you say?
Well, yes. I mean, traditionally, Israel was much more closely aligned with the Palestinian cause and various Arab dictatorships, but it has shifted significantly towards Israel in the last 10 or 15 years, particularly since Modi came to power. India does still maintain relations with Iran, which, under the Islamic government that's still in control in Iran is obviously a enemy. The Islamic government's an enemy of Israel. So Modi does have to tread carefully. However, at this point, India is also an emerging superpower. And I think India, both for democratic solidarity reasons, but also for pragmatic and strategic reasons, probably sees Israel as a winner in the medium or long term, and the Islamic government in Iran as a loser. And maybe Modi is thinking, how long will that Islamic regime even be in power in Iran? And he's backing the power, the emerging power, which is Israel, as are, I might add, quite a lot of Sunni Arab states like the United Arab Emirates or Morocco have also aligned themselves closer to Israel, at least in part because they see Israel as a vibrant country that's pushing ahead, particularly in new technologies like artificial intelligence.
Okay, having said that, Tom, India does maintain relations with Iran and Gulf states as well as Israel simultaneously. How does New Delhi balance these relationships without appearing partisan?
Well, a lot of Arab countries, as I just mentioned, are now quite close to Israel, especially the Gulf Arab ones. So there isn't necessarily a contradiction. It might be a bit more complicated regarding Turkey and Iran, because both the governments of those in Ankara and Tehran are not exactly on friendly terms with the government in Jerusalem. So Modi is balancing things. However, India is a big, powerful country, and it doesn't have to worry too much about offending the Ayatollahs in Iran at this point. And it's also got growing self-confidence. I might also add, although it's often not at the forefront, it's not mentioned at the forefront, that India is one of the countries in the world which is both historically and currently has a lack of anti-Semitism or hostility towards Jews, which unfortunately exists in many other parts of the world. And there is some kind of shared bonding, also vis-a-vis Islamic extremism. India is predominantly Hindu, Israel is predominantly Jewish. Most of the other countries in between them are predominantly Muslim, and some of those countries are militantly Muslim, or at least there's the danger of militancy, like in Afghanistan and Pakistan and Iran, all of which neighbor India, I believe. I'm not sure about Iran, but definitely Pakistan and Afghanistan. So I'm not sure. India can balance things. I mean, international relations are always about balancing between different countries. Turkey, for example, maintains relations with both Russia and Ukraine. And indeed, it also maintains relations with Iran and Israel. So I don't think it's particularly more complicated for India to do so.
And how might Washington view this growing India-Israel alignment, Tom, with its broader Middle East strategies and Indo-Pacific strategies?
I would imagine Washington welcomes it because, India also traditionally has been a little bit close to China and Russia and so on. And anything that locks India into Western allies, to American allies like Israel, is presumably a good thing from an American point of view. And it's Modi firmly making sure he does not want to be too much in what we call previously used to be called the Third World or the Global South camp or the Chinese-led world. And, Israel is one of America's closest allies. And I also think it says something for the strength of the relationships. This is Modi's second state visit to Israel, and I don't think he's made that many state visits to two countries. So, it's again a sign of the closeness.
Okay, Tom, thank you so much for joining us today. I appreciate your analysis.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Now, after the break, we'll take a look at major stories from the region. Stay with us. Welcome back to A News. Now let's take a closer look at the key stories shaping the region. A Turkish military aircraft has crashed in western Turkey, resulting in the death of its pilot. Authorities say rescue teams were immediately dispatched, while both military and judicial investigations are now underway.
A Turkish F-16 fighter jet crashed in Turkey's western Balıkesir province early Wednesday, killing its pilot, according to a statement by the National Defense Ministry. The ministry said radio contact and tracking data were lost with the aircraft shortly after it took off from the 9th Main Jet Base Command in Balıkesir at 12:56 a.m. local time. The incident occurred during what was reported as a training flight, but authorities have not yet released further details on the exact circumstances leading to the crash. Search and rescue operations were launched immediately after communication was lost, and the crash site was quickly located. According to local press reports, the aircraft crashed near the Istanbul-Izmir highway, scattering wreckage across a wide area. In its statement, the Defense Ministry confirmed that the pilot had been killed and said the cause of the accident would be determined following an investigation by an examination team. Turkish officials have expressed their condolences to the pilot's friends and family, who has since been identified as Major Ibrahim Bolat. Balıkesir Governor Ismail Ustaoğlu has expressed his sympathies. Azerbaijan's defense minister also sent a message to his Turkish counterpart, expressing his country's condolences for the death of the pilot. Meanwhile, Turkish Justice Minister Yilmaz Tunç announced that the Balıkesir Chief Public Prosecutor's Office had opened a formal investigation into the crash. He said the chief public prosecutor, a deputy prosecutor, and 2 additional prosecutors had arrived at the scene to oversee the inquiry. The investigation is expected to examine technical data, flight records, and other evidence to determine the cause of the accident. This is Adam Morrow for A News in Istanbul, Turkey.
Pakistani and Afghan forces clashed along their border on Tuesday, each blaming the other for starting the deadly violence. It comes just days after Pakistani airstrikes killed at least 17 people inside Afghanistan around midnight on Saturday, according to officials. Our correspondent Tamim Bahis has the details from Kabul.
Tensions briefly flared along the border on Tuesday as Afghan and Pakistani forces exchanged fire in Nangarhar's Nazian district. The clash lasted several hours before subsiding, with no casualties reported. Both sides blamed each other for the confrontation. Pakistan maintains that its actions are aimed at armed groups it says are operating from Afghan territory, a charge Afghan authorities have consistently rejected as baseless. With tensions flaring at the border and diplomatic channels now engaged, the situation remains fragile. Amir Khan Muttaqi, the foreign minister of Afghanistan, held a telephone conversation with Rosemary DiCarlo, the United Nations Under-Secretary General for Political and Peacebuilding Affairs. According to Afghanistan's Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Muttaqi expressed deep concern over what he described as the targeting of civilians in Sunday morning's strikes. He called on foreign diplomats to visit the affected areas to verify his claim that no armed individuals were killed, despite Pakistan's assertions that militants were targeted. In a statement, the ministry said that over the past 4 years, similar Pakistani attacks have only harmed civilians, and that not a single armed individual claimed by Pakistan has been confirmed killed. The United Nations Assistance Mission in Afghanistan has also confirmed civilian casualties, including 13 members of one family. Tamim Bahis in Kabul, A News.
Iran has signalled it's ready to forge defence ties with Armenia. Major General Abdulrahim Musavi emphasised the importance of increased cooperation between the two countries during a meeting with Armenian Defence Minister Suren Papikian in Tehran. Our correspondent Turas Shiraliliu has the details.
Armenian Defense Minister Suren Papikian visited Tehran and met with President Masoud Pezeshkian, Chairman of Chief of Staff of Iran's Armed Forces, Major General Abdulrahim Musavi, and Defense Minister Brigadier General Aziz Nasirzadeh. According to official sources, expansion of bilateral defense ties as well as developments in the South Caucasus were discussed during the visit on Tuesday. President Pezeshkian told the visiting minister that Iran is determined to finalize the comprehensive strategic partnership agreement with Armenia. stated that Tehran is serious in strengthening economic and corridor cooperation with Yerevan, considering the friendly relations between their governments. Also in the meeting with Iran's top military official, General Mousavi expressed Tehran's satisfaction with the peace process between the Republic of Armenia and the Republic of Azerbaijan. Chairman of Chief of Staff of Iran's Armed Forces expressed Tehran's readiness to develop defense cooperation with Yerevan. And in the meeting with his Armenian counterpart, Iran's defense minister welcomed expansion of ties with Armenia in the context of mutual understanding and strategic partnership. General Nasirzadeh stressed that regional security must be ensured through interaction and cooperation of regional states, rejecting presence of foreign countries in the region. The visit came on the eve of Iran-US indirect nuclear talks scheduled for Thursday in Geneva and amid escalation of tensions and speculation of war between Tehran and Washington following US military buildup in the region. Turaj Shiralilu, Tehran, Foreign News.
The 10th trilateral meeting of the Foreign Relations Committees of the Parliaments of Azerbaijan, Turkey and Georgia was held in Baku. Addressing the meeting, Turkey's Foreign Affairs Minister Fuat Oktay said peace and stability in the South Caucasus remain a priority for Turkey and voiced strong support for the Azerbaijan-Armenia peace process. Participants also touched on regional connectivity projects and broader geopolitical developments, reaffirming their commitment to closer trilateral cooperation.
Immediate neighbors. Two centers of power require unity.
Now we'll continue with major stories from the region. The EU says Russia must withdraw from occupied territories, including Georgia, as part of any lasting peace settlement. A news correspondent in Tbilisi has more.
The European Union is formally calling on Russia to withdraw its military forces from occupied territories, including those in Georgia, as part of its core conditions for achieving lasting peace on the continent. EU High Representative Kaja Kallas confirms that she has shared this position with the EU member states. She stated that Russia must respect its existing international obligations, which already require the withdrawal of troops from territories it occupies. According to Kallas, Russia is currently failing to comply with at least 30 such agreements. She specifically names Georgia and Moldova as countries where Russia has long-standing commitments to withdraw forces. The EU position also applies more broadly, including Russian military presence linked to the war in Ukraine, as well as deployments connected to security arrangements in Belarus and Armenia. Kallas acknowledges that some observers consider these demands difficult to achieve. She says directly that such requirements may sound unrealistic. However, she also states that Russia's own demands in negotiations are unrealistic, including attempts to secure territory through political pressure rather than military control. According to her, the EU's goal is to rebalance negotiations and focus on the core issue, Russia's continued military presence in neighboring states. For Georgia, this places its occupied territories firmly within the wider European security agenda. The issue of Russian troop withdrawal is now formally linked to discussions about ending the war in Ukraine and establishing long-term regional stability. The Georgian government says it would welcome any real progress. Georgian Dream member Irakli Kadagishvili stated that if international efforts lead to concrete steps toward the occupation, this would of course be positive for Georgia. But at the same time, he notes that it remains unclear what practical mechanisms will follow. Nini Nikolaishvili, Tbilisi, A News.
Foreign business activity in Kazakhstan is on the rise, with notable shifts in the geography of investment and corporate presence. New official data points to a sharp increase in companies with Chinese ownership. Here's more on that story.
Kazakhstan is seeing a clear increase in foreign business activity, with China emerging as the main driver of this growth. According to the National Bureau of Statistics, in 2025, the number of registered legal entities and branches with foreign ownership rose by 8%, reaching 64,000. The fastest growth came from companies with Chinese ownership. The number increased by 56% to 8,400. A similar trend was recorded for businesses from Uzbekistan, up 43% to 8,500 companies. At the same time, the presence of several traditional partners declined, with a reduced number of companies linked to Russia, Turkey, and Kyrgyzstan. This trend fits into a broader regional picture. China remains a strategic investor across Central Asia, and by mid-2025, the total volume of accumulated Chinese investment in the region reached nearly $36 billion, 1.5 times higher than in 2020. A significant share of this growth has been concentrated in Kazakhstan, which has become the largest recipient of Chinese capital, accounting for about 1/3 of the regional total. Analysts note that the investment is gradually shifting away from the raw materials sector toward the manufacturing and energy. This points to a change in the nature of China's presence in the region, from primarily resource-based to more structured and long-term. Fariza Kalimurzina, Almaty, A News.
Now we'll take a short break, and when we return, we'll assess Turkey's push for normalization with Armenia and its implications for regional stability. We'll see you shortly. Welcome back to A News. Turkey says that normalization with Armenia will strengthen regional stability as Ankara reiterates its support for dialogue and reopening channels between the two countries. The process comes amid ongoing Armenia-Azerbaijan peace efforts and shifting geopolitical balances in the South Caucasus. Let's bring in our guest, Mr. Melih Demirtas, former diplomat and political analyst, joining us from Ankara, Turkey. Melih, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Mr. Nafrin.
Now, how serious is Turkey about full normalization with Armenia at this stage?
Yes, it's a good and critical question of nowadays, maybe these last months, important question, because after the, as you know, the solution of this Soviet Union, we have seen already that the regions burning between our brother country, Azerbaijan and Armenia. Of course, there are important conflicts and some important atrocities. I also commemorate here on this occasion Khojaly massacre, Khojaly genocide also. Because of the situation, because of these important tensions in these two countries, we had also an important problem also with Armenia as Turkey. But now, actually we've seen that these strategic calculations and actually these positive relations can really be built again. And this atmosphere, I think, thanks to maybe the support of important powers, I mean, firstly, of course, from the United States, but also from Russia and I think China, all these, I think, frameworks now supporting the atmosphere positively for the relations between Armenia and Azerbaijan. So Turkey has also added an important positive impetus to this framework. Because as you know, as between Turkey, Azerbaijan and Georgia, these three important actors of the region, I mean, between Caucasia, Eurasia and Europe, we have already built an important framework of cooperation, transportation, and energy infrastructure. Now, I think with Armenia, some things can be really started again. We already actually started it with important maybe negotiations, thanks to our skillful ambassadors, thanks to our skillful bureaucrats. They already started to talk between, I mean, the delegates of Turkish and Armenian representatives. And I think in these high levels, we already seen that these positive messages still continue.
And Melih, what concrete steps define normalization? Are we looking at diplomatic recognition, border reopening, trade corridors?
Actually, as you maybe follow from the latest developments, the flights, I mean, first of all, the human connection is important, Ms. Tuna, the humans, and of course the flow of trades, flow of this cultural, maybe social integration between the people. It is maybe the number one rule of some connections between states. states are always this cold, maybe, phase of these political atmospheres. We already know that every state, every political elite can have its own agenda. Also, Armenian elites, Azerbaijan, in Turkey, we have always some important, of course, national interests in all regions. But still, the humans must really interact between themselves. So I think Turkish representatives, also from Turkish Airlines, as you've seen from the news, maybe in the latest months, also about, as you said, the border openings. Of course, the full opening of the border is not now discussed openly in the media, but I think in the delegates level and in the maybe diplomatic channels, we already seen that some maybe important dialogues also continued about these borders. But as I said, first of all, the flights is an important step to open it between, Istanbul, Yerevan, Ankara, Yerevan, and the other cities of Armenia and Turkey, of course. But also the trade relations, thanks to new roads, thanks to these new projects, also with the maybe pivotal role of Azerbaijan.
And how closely is the Turkey-Armenia track tied to progress in Armenia-Azerbaijan peace negotiations?
Definitely is an factor, because historical baggages are still there. We already know that in communitarian levels, some important grievances still also occurring, although political elites are so motivated to follow the rules of diplomacy. Of course, we must also do something, as I said in my previous response, for the community levels. And now I think in the second phase, both Azerbaijani and Armenian communities and civil society representatives must be supported for this dialogue. And Turkey, at that sense, can have also an important positive role. We already started it, as you said, with maybe this important Karabakh victories of Azerbaijan. And the Pashinyan government, I think, from the side of Armenia, also showed important signals, both Turkey, Azerbaijan, also to other actors in world politics now. And I think this is the very right time to follow this line of positive diplomacy, both in Azerbaijan and also in Armenia.
And is Ankara acting independently or in coordination with Baku on this process?
The progress and the diplomacy is always Azerbaijan first. We already, always repeated this since the end of this Soviet times, very harsh times for many communities, first of all, or neighbor brother country, Azerbaijan. After the dissolution of these years, Soviet years, we already repeated this, Azerbaijan first. And I think this policy has never changed. Because of this, the connections and diplomatic channels, first of all, opened always with the representative of Azerbaijan. I think the last visit is because of the important or previous former Vice President Fuat Oktay was there. Azerbaijan in Baku and in other maybe platforms made important diplomatic contacts there. And not only his, but also the other actors' important messages. Since, as I said, the end of this harsh years, since maybe this last 30 years, we can see that this never changed. Yes, we have all independent policies, it is the foreign policy actors, but also the connections is so sui generis between Turkey and Azerbaijan about this positive and about these brother relations.
And how might domestic politics in both Turkey and Armenia influence the pace of reconciliation or recalibration?
Definitely, these are not be separated from foreign policy thinking. Some classical thinkers always said that domestic politics or public opinion, even civil society, this cannot be calculated in some foreign policy structures. But I think in this changing atmosphere and balances, I always call it this postmodern times of this digitalization, anything can be done not with inclusion of this public opinions and of course domestic politics. Because of this, I think Turkish and Armenian domestic era and politics also so much important. I think from our president and from our governmental sections, because of this, some important positive messages already sent to the government of course, Pashinyan, but also Mr. Pashinyan made important some visits, first of all, to of course, Istanbul, to Ankara. These visits, we could not see in the very former years, as I said, after the dissolution of Soviet Union. But now, I think with this changing attitude of this government in Armenia, I think much more positive domestic opinion will be also rebuilt Of course, it's a process. It's a very important procedure, Ms. Tuna. In every country, we can see some far rightist idealists and thinkers. It is so normal in even the United States, Russia, in every country. But I think they will be, again, as you said, recalibrated and rebuilt with this, I think, positive atmosphere they see already in this region.
And does normalization process shift regional balances, particularly regarding Russia's influence in the South Caucasus?
Definitely. Russia is an important actor, is an important force. We must accept it. Already told that this about Soviet times. But after Soviet times, of course, especially with the presidency of Mr. Putin, we can say that Russia wants to keep its balance and also its quote-unquote skillful diplomacy in many regions. Not only in its near abroad, I think also in Eurasia, Caucasia, even in the Middle East. And nowadays, as you've seen, Mr. Putin also had important connections still with Mr. Aliyev, with Azerbaijan, but also with this important former, I will call, intimate ally, Armenia. I call former because we already seen that there had been once important, strong connections between the elites and, of course, maybe the intelligence and army elites. But nowadays, I think Armenia shifted its position much more with a multipolar line. It can have an important connection with Europe, United States, also with Russia nowadays. So I think Mr. Putin calibrated itself, also Mr. Lavrov, and thanks to other crisis atmosphere, I think we have seen still in Ukraine, in Iran, also in Palestine, I think Russia will continue to restructure its foreign policy, of course, with this historical, maybe traditional diplomatic lines of Russian foreign policy corridors.
And Melih, are there historical sensitivities that could resurface and slow momentum, or are we well and truly over that phase?
I think we are still in the first phase, Ms. Tuna. This is the first phase of political, maybe, motivation, political elites, maybe, arrangements. Yes, this first phase really is going on in a very successful, I think, manner. But in this second phase, maybe with economic integration, as I said, with the opening of these flights, with the opening of new, maybe border and visa procedures, and in the second phase and third phase, we will see this communitarian situations. Yes, the community must be supported, as I said, because of this civil society members must be supported. It includes, unfortunately, this Armenian diaspora also. I say Armenian diaspora because in the former years, we have seen that they can be really blind to this reality of this region, to this historical reality of the region. But now I think also even these diaspora members of Armenia and some other, of course, civil society representatives of there, they started to be have an important, maybe changing manner about this diplomatic, maybe positive relations. Yes, there are still things to be done, to be followed, and we will maybe continue to follow this line of diplomacy, also in public diplomacy level, also in social diplomacy level, not only this political elites level. I think we must keep this track positively in the region.
And what role might the EU or other external actors play in facilitating this process?
Yes, the other important side, new, we always call them, as a separate body, as a fragmented body. Unfortunately, there are not one Europe nowadays. As you also see maybe in some important summits in these last weeks, months, we have seen from Merz, Germany, from Macron's France, of course, not EU member, but important player in Europe, United Kingdom, Starmer's United Kingdom, they can really play some different roles and follow different paths in these lines. I think France, for example, is really different because of its maybe intimate relations, as I said, because of the social and cultural public diplomacy with Armenia, with Armenian intellectuals, Armenian members of community. In France still, they are really very effective, but also a much more realist, quote-unquote, Germany we have seen, and also an important diplomatic player of United Kingdom. So I think you must have, first of all, a unity to find also a strong voice in this region, because in these last months, we already seen that, and regarding this unity, we have seen really important fragmentation about this European power. And really, we support them. I mean, as Turkey, we always keep this track of these positive channels, positive diplomacy with European Union, and they are important bureaucrats. And I think they will visit soon, again and again. I think they paid already some important visits, but I think they will visit soon this region, and they will see with their own eyes that this region has also a new impetus, and they must maybe not have this, again, orientalistic view to some nations as they once did to maybe to Turkey, to Azerbaijan. But now I think they have much more neutral foreign policy, starting with this new era.
Mehdi, it's always a pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much for your analysis and insight today.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr.
That's the news for this hour. Stay tuned to A News for more updates, and thank you for watching.